I also think the job posting and the whole job board and how we get jobs is incredibly broken and due for a massive overhaul.
Hi, Tessa. So happy to have you in the studio today. How are you doing?
Doing great. Thank you so much for having me. This conversation topic, I think, is going to be very interesting for people.
Absolutely. And all the work that you do in empowerment, would you please start us out with a little bit of introduction, who you are and how do you
Mhm.
help? If people don't already know you, it'll be magical for them to hear all the work that you do.
I think most people know me as the job doctor or job doctor Tessa on TikTok, Instagram, and various social platforms. And what I do is I really try to help people navigate their careers. I used to work on the other side of the equation and help companies as the head of HR. And I realized I see what's going on behind closed doors and I see what's working and not working. So I went to the other end and now I help people try and figure out how to make it all work for them. The thing I wish that had existed when I was building my own career.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And anybody who follows you on TikTok, or all the other avenues that you're accessible at, you speak a lot about mid-career executives, especially women,
Hmm.
feeling stuck, or kind of stuck in that mid-career level, trying to get to director or vice president. What is your advice to someone who is in that position and wants to get promoted?
Well, it's hard to say exactly because I talk about the 5 stages of growth in my book, The Unspoken Truths for Career Success. There's lots of chapters on this. And depending on the level that you're at in your career, depends on the skill set that you need to practice. But I would say if I have to just generalize, getting comfortable with conflict is probably the one thing that women often struggle with that acts as a fatal flaw in their career if they can't do it. Sometimes I think there's a belief that if you get along with everybody and you never ruffle feathers and you don't push back, then somehow that's going to help you. And it actually hurts your career. And you need to learn how to have conflict that's positive and resolve problems rather than think that conflict's a bad thing.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, we have to speak generally here because, of course, everybody's situation is slightly unique and nuanced. So, staying on that general note, if you are accepting of conflict,
Mm-hmm.
what is a healthy way to do it? Could you share an example? Of course, you've had years of experience with this. Any
Yes.
examples that come to mind that this was a don't and this is a do? Like this is the type of conflict you should accept and embrace, but not this one.
Well, I think about any kind of conflict that you have can end up being positive, but the key is assuming good intent in the other person. And when I
Mm.
sit and listen to a manager, for example, and a team member having conflict and have done this, decades, it almost always goes south because they're assuming bad intent in the other. Like you're trying to take advantage of me, manager. That would be, a belief that shows up in our language. And so I tell people assuming good intent is really hard to do if you're not paying attention to your language. And there's 3 magic sentences that I recommend you use, even if you don't know how to have the greatest conversation and don't know all the tricks, saying, is that what you intended? Do you see it differently? Or is there something missing or a piece of information missing that would help me understand? All of those are assuming good intent and assuming that the other person's on your side, not against you. And I think it helps the conversation continue where it could get shut down.
I
It's just
really like.
a very simple tip.
Yeah, no, but that also helps you put yourself by asking those questions in the other person's shoes. Maybe there is a very good reason that you are not privy to, that once you ask those questions, it's going to get clear to you.
Yes, I had a client the other day call and say, we had a plan. Me and my manager, we had built this budget and we were going to do things a certain way. And she got out of this executive meeting and comes over and she slashes the budget and changes everything. And it just blew me away. Like, how can there be a good explanation for that? I said, you've got to assume good intent and go into the conversation and say, I know that we had planned to do it this way, is there, what happened? And is there something missing that would help me understand why you made a new decision? And once she had the conversation, she realized, oh, there are some things I'm not privy to. And it allowed them to have a really productive conversation instead of a conversation where she was going to walk away feeling taken advantage of, or like her manager didn't listen to her or care about her feedback.
Hmm. Yeah, that's a good point. To even when it's a manager-employee relationship, to just have that open communication to say,
Mm-hmm.
"Hey, what happened?"
Yeah.
Kind of along those lines, how do you? So one thing is getting good with conflict or getting yourself ready for promotion. What about the other side? Like, how do you make sure that your managers see you as ready for promotion, or your leaders or your
Yes.
stakeholders?
It's such a great question. I think there's a couple of things. One, it sounds really simple, but when I work with people on resumes, for example, and I say, tell me about your value proposition or tell me what's your secret sauce or what makes you so good, they have a very hard time answering it. And I promise if you don't know what it is, your manager doesn't know what it is. Like you have to be able to articulate, here's the thing I do really well, or here's my secret sauce. And that will help you get promotions when you are able to tell the story that then gets repeated. So that's one important thing. A lot of times people don't measure the things that they're doing either. And the language of business is numbers. So if you can't articulate and share with your manager regular updates that say, hey, here's one of the things I'm working on. We moved it from here to here, or we were able to save this much money, or bring in additional revenue, or fix these many steps in the process and consolidate in this way. If you can't articulate how you're making a difference, that also hurts you in a very big way. And I think a lot of people think they shouldn't have to write the script. I should be able to do my work and my work should be evident to other people and I should therefore get a promotion. But it simply doesn't work that way. You have to be somebody that toots your own horn to a degree. And it's not women often think it's self promotion and it's like a very distasteful trait. But when you are able to share what you're getting done and the outcomes that you're getting, I would say that is not distasteful. That is most helpful to the business and to you in your career.
Mhm, mhm. Yeah, I hear that quite a bit from my clients, that, and I'm not in it for the money. So those are the sort of the
Mm-hmm.
like those waiting to be tapped on the shoulder
Yes.
and then saying, I'm not in it for the money, and then getting disappointed when you find out that you're not making as much as some of the colleagues in your
Right.
workplace.
I read a really interesting report and it's a little bit old, but it says women are not particularly good at asking for raises or promotions. They're getting better at it. But the commonality and the reason that women historically haven't boiled down to one factor. And that factor was, I don't think I have permission to talk about a raise. And so I hate this idea that somebody has to give us permission to say good things or to share what we're getting done or to ask for a raise. And when you're behind closed doors and kind of seeing the whole company, you start to go, oh, there's a reason that person makes more money. They advocate for themselves. And I don't like I don't like when women in particular, or men for that matter, think that because they do a good job, someone else is supposed to notice and reward them. I really think you should be first and foremost your biggest advocate, followed by your manager if you can do that. And the
Hmm.
other thing is, I've sat in on all these promotion meetings, these secret promotion meetings that
Yeah.
companies have a couple of times a year. And about 9 out of 10 times, I'm not even exaggerating on this, the reason somebody does not get a promotion is because the other people in the room will say, well, they sound really great, but I don't know them. Like they
Hmm.
need to work with me. And so understanding that you need to work across boundaries and not stay in your silo, and you need to establish relationships with other people, knowing that that is the number one reason somebody doesn't get the promotion in those meetings. It's really important that you nurture those relationships.
Yeah, I resonate with that so much. And this is why I'm such a fan of yours, Tessa, because I have been in those meetings where I've tried to promote a person who has worked for me. And other leaders, as you know, there are only so many promotions you can give away in a function or a company or organization. Um, it's a very hard process for a manager to stand up for their person if that person has not done the work of getting to know other leaders, like the related function,
Mm-hmm.
don't know them, then I don't even have enough clout to push that person up as a leader in the organization. It's
That's
very
exactly
important for
right.
them to do that publicity for themselves.
Yeah, the higher you go in an organization, as your career grows into a stage 3 and a 4 and a 5, your success is largely measured by the relationships you have across a company, not
Yeah,
just within your department. And I
yeah.
think I think it's within a lot of most people's control to to do something to fix that. You can pick mentors in other departments and say, "Hey, I'm watching the way you give presentations or the way you lead people, and I love that you do this and this. Will you help me before I go into this meeting and just hear this out?" That's one way to do it. You can ask to be on a cross functional initiative, and that's another way to do it. But certainly, you can job shadow, ask your manager to job shadow another department. But there
Mhm.
are lots of ways to help promote that kind of interaction without waiting for it to naturally happen.
Yeah. It does happen, but very few and far between, I think, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
that natural
Yeah.
somebody picking you for a job or a project.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and as you know, I'm such a big fan of you have more control than you think you have to make the things happen to help your career advance. It really isn't that you just have to sit there and wait for something to happen. You can put certain things in motion and make things happen for yourself.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. That's a great segue for my next question is, um, once you have made your wishes known,
Mhm.
and say you've asked for a high visibility project, you've made your wishes known, and nothing is happening.
Mhm.
How do you judge whether this is the place, this is the time you part ways with that organization and say, this is not going to work for me. I'm not going to be promotable, considered promotable here.
Ah, so you brought up conflict again. There's a
Yeah.
conflict. Yeah. So in conflicts like that are really common, I think it's interesting. I asked my followers, I said, how many of you would speak up in a situation like this? 94% said they wouldn't. They would leave the company before they would speak up. And I was like, what? Are you kidding me? And I said, tell me more. And they're like, I shouldn't have to write the script for the company. I'm like, wow, that's like, in a relationship with a spouse, like you can't just assume they know what you want. You have to talk through things. And so the first conversation I would have is with my manager, and I would say something like, I had asked to do these things so that I could grow my career, but I noticed that, you haven't assigned me to a cross-functional team yet. Um, is there something going on I don't understand, or is there a reason you don't want to move forward on that? You've got to be able to have the hard conversation. And you might even say, if that doesn't look like it's something that's doable right now, would you mind if I sit in on an executive meeting or help you make part of a presentation in this cross functional group so they get to know me? Your directive and say, would that be a possibility? And if your manager continues to say no, I would ask the hard question. I would say, I feel like I could be reading more into this than there is, but I feel like as I'm trying to suggest things that will help me grow and get exposure and help me be better for the company, that um, that those things aren't happening, and I'm not sure how to interpret them. Now, notice I didn't blame the manager and say you know, you're not doing this, you're bad,
Mm-hmm.
and then say, is that what you intended, or is there something that I'm missing that would help me understand why that's the case? And sometimes it's just that a manager is managing a lot of people and they need an extra nudge. And sometimes there is something going on. But to ask the hard question before you leave a company is incredibly important because they'll give you clues. They'll give you clues as to how you're perceived and how you're seen. And at that point, you choose, do I fix the perception? Do I push? Or do I go? But you've got to have more information.
Yeah. Or reinvent yourself at a brand new company, right? Those are the
Right.
two options. So it sounds like the two things that I took away from what you just advised. One was come with curiosity, like what is the
Yes.
reason? And then
Mm-hmm.
also back to your original point of seeing good intent, like not blame the manager that they're not doing their part to help you.
Yeah, I give people the benefit of the doubt. I found that that helps because sometimes as managers who are also juggling a lot of different things, not just your career and what you
Yeah,
need,
yeah.
sometimes you need to give an extra nudge or have that conversation. And more times than not, they'll say, "I am so sorry. I did promise I would do that. Let me follow through with it." Very few times does the manager say, "Yeah, there's some problems." But if they do, I would be so excited to know because then you can say, "Okay, I want to know what they are." Because I am interested in growing and I want to understand what I need to do to make these micro adjustments during the year to make me better so that I can grow. I would run at it rather than run away from it.
Yeah, that aligns so well with negotiation. What we say in negotiation is negotiation starts at no. So when you hear
Mhm.
no, you can then ask for what is the reason behind the no, or why is it a no? When is it going to be a yes? So it
I
allows you
love
to
that.
have
Say that one
discussion.
more time. I haven't heard that, but I love that. The
So
negotiation.
negotiation begins at no.
Hmm.
So when you hear a no, you can start asking those curiosity-based questions, and
Hmm.
that allows you to solve the problem.
That's
Before
right.
you were guessing, now you have concrete, they give you the keys to the kingdom, so to speak.
Well, so many people think a no, that all is lost when they get a no. And I'm like, no, a no is great because if I have a no, then especially if it's pay related, if you're negotiating pay and you get a no, then understanding what it would take to get to a yes is important. But also, there's this psychological component. If a manager has had to say no to your raise or promotion this time, I promise you, they're thinking in the back of their head the next time those come available, I don't have many more chances with this person to say no. And so, it does have a psychological effect. There's an expectation that you've set, and that alone, there's benefit in setting the expectation.
That is such a good point. Yeah, they will remember it, and they
Hmm.
will either pay you in different way. If they can't pay you in like base
Hmm.
salary, they'll find
Yeah.
other ways to, if they like you and want you and want to keep you happy, they'll
Hmm.
find ways to give you back something, and that works to your benefit.
It does. It does.
That is a good point. Yeah. Okay, so let's say with this person, like they've asked, they've been told not yet, then they've asked again, they've gotten high visibility projects, they've performed, and they still don't see a promotion. So how long is too long to stay in that same job?
Good question. Um, it's a complicated answer. I would say there's a few more things you need to know. Besides, did I ask and get a no? That's kind of a one dimensional approach. The other thing I would want to understand in corporate America is, hey, can you tell me where I sit in the pay range? Where do I sit in the pay range or the pay band? And is there a level 2 in this pay band that I can move up to and what would be required? That is the language that a manager or HR is going to understand. And if they can't answer that question, it gives you some clues as to whether you want to be there or not. Let's say that you're low in the pay band and they say, I'm not exactly sure what you need to do to get more. Well, then it's time to get curious and try and put together a plan. I call it an if then proposal and say, if I do X, what would be the win? What would be the thing that would help us look good as a department and that is really important? And if I do that thing, then can we work a raise in? Because companies love two things. They love free and they'll go for free all day long and give you the title without the pay. And companies love to put off now what they can pay later. They like to pay after the performance. And so knowing that about companies doesn't mean you have to take a promotion and not get a raise, but let's say that they want to give you an added responsibility without the raise, which frequently happens, then it gives you this wonderful opportunity to get the title, which is worth $10,000 to $15,000 on your resume when you leave the company. I promise that raise in responsibility has currency. And it also allows you to create an agreement of a raise 3 months down the road, for example. And that's better than no raise at all. So part of your negotiation has to be moving into an if then if they say no the first time.
I love that. That number is powerful too. That if you get that, because a lot of times we are programmed or conditioned to think that titles are not important. In fact, people tell you titles are not
Mm-hmm.
important.
Titles are really important. If I see a resume, especially in today's world where people are jumping every 2 years to a new job, um, I get wary of a person who has jumped multiple times and not gotten promoted within the company that they exist in, because it tells me that they jump when things get hard, or that's the assumption I make. And if somebody has a promotion on their resume in that company, it tells me, A, they made it through a really, the honeymoon period of a company. They did hard things and did them well, and they got the promotion. And so the title does mean something. The title means a heck of a lot, even if it's a delayed um, advantage to you and it doesn't show up until your next job and the next pay offer that you get in a company outside of that one. It still
Mhm.
has value.
Wow, it's good to get that perspective from you because it's you can, because there's so much talk about like just jump jobs to get more pay,
Mm-hmm.
but you also have to think about it from the recruiter or hiring manager's perspective. If they see you jumping, they will make those assumptions that maybe you never got promoted at this job, so you just got a higher title by moving to a new role. But my question now is, are you able to stick through the hard times, turbulent times,
That's
the
right. And
yeah.
and you know what? I teach people you do get more money when you jump roles. You do. That's one of the main ways that you can increase your compensation package. But people forget that the other way to do it is to show that you have increased responsibilities in a company and the company had faith in you to give you more and more. So you had success. It says more about this person can be successful than any other thing is an internal promotion. And so I love them and I love seeing them on resumes. And I am seeing a really interesting trend right now. And that is people who either have internal promotions or show that they've played in different roles in a company,
Mm,
even if it's a cross and if it's a lateral move, say they did something in operations and HR and finance. So they understand the ecosystem of a company and how it works. That is also worth a lot of money on your resume to show that you can play in the whole ecosystem. And again, is something that a lot of people will say, well, I would never take a lateral move. Well, you should consider a lateral
should.
move
Yeah.
because it makes for a very robust resume.
It sure does, and that's a lot of times people talk about the climbing wall versus a ladder, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
do it as a
Yeah.
jungle gym, like you
Mm-hmm.
prepare your career like a jungle gym.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, yeah, just go up and down the P&L, right? Like revenue, profit centers, efficiencies, like see where you can add value and go after that in the same organization, and you're going to be a much better leader and a much sought after candidate in if you go out into the
That's
job
right.
market.
Well, remember what I said earlier about the people that get promotions have good relationships in other departments. People who get paid more understand other departments as well. They understand how it works. And so a company that sees that on a resume goes, oh, that person's going to work well with sales because they understand sales world and they understand operations and efficiency. So they're more likely to be able to come up with solutions and work well across all of those different functions. That's the thought process that goes on.
Great perspective. I so love that. In your experience, how much leverage? So if you're this person who wants to get promoted, it's almost at the cusp, it's not happening. Do you go get an alternate job offer? And does that give you enough of a leverage to negotiate a promotion or a pay raise? And what is the risk of doing that?
That is the second big way to get increases in a company is and to have leverage is to have a competing job offer. It's a lot like when you list a house. A realtor will come by and say, well, this is what I think the house is worth, but you really don't know till you get offers. And the same is true. Compensation is not it's science as much as it's a little bit of art. And so having that other offer does tell an employer that at least one other company feels like you're worth this in the market. And it becomes a really powerful factor to get an increase. But you have to be very careful about the way that you position it with your company if you want to stay where you're at. And I would say something like, and you can listen for the good intent. I was not necessarily looking for a job, but I got a call and I, took the call, and I, in short, was given this really great job offer. Quite honestly, I really like this company. I like being here. I like working with you, but it doesn't make sense for me to stay unless I understand and I have a career path that makes sense and that I know that I can continue to grow with this company as well. I'd really like to stay here. Is there a possibility that the company here would be able to give me the same compensation, and or what would a career path look like if I stay? And so asking your manager to be your partner in that rather than say or else statements are horrible. If you can't match this, I'm leaving. That's a horrible message, and you're just not going to get what you want. But when you say I want to stay here, but I also have to do what's best for me, but is there a way we can create a path so that I can stay here? That is so much different of a tone and tenor, and you're so much more likely to get what you want if you pitch it that way.
Yeah, I want to stay with that script for a second. So thank you for sharing that. That is so powerful. Hopefully, people are taking notes or listen to the replay. One of the things that you said was when you're talking to your manager, when you said, "Can the company help us get there?" You've sort of allied yourself with your manager, and now you're solving the problem together.
That's right.
And you're not saying, "Can you help me?" But then you immediately jump to, "Can the company help us get there?" Which I think
Mm-hmm.
is a solid goal, because that's how you create an ally and solve this problem of keeping you in this company and giving you a pay raise or a promotion.
Well,
All under one.
partner language, when we're partnering
Yeah.
well, is about we. And so, how can we craft this? How could we do this? Is so much better than me versus you. And so, it's again, a very subtle change, but I like to craft conversations where it does feel like you're partners, and partners solve problems together. Partners are on the same page, partners both win. And I think it's really important that you, before you go in for a really difficult conversation, write down what you're going to say and read it to somebody and say,
Yeah.
does this feel collaborative? Does it feel like we're partners, or does it feel like I'm assuming bad intent, or it's us, me versus them?
Yeah. Don't fear having the conversation, but
Mm-hmm.
just prep for it. Like just practice it.
Yeah. And small words can make just the biggest difference in the world. Just
Yeah.
very small words.
Yeah, so true. So true. And I guess one more question that people are gonna have as soon as we say that, like, go get a second job offer, is, well, the job market is so tough right now. It's so turbulent. No one's taking calls, or I'm getting ghosted. What do
Mm-hmm.
you think of that? Is this real? Is the job market really hard right now, or has it always been like this and we just need to do something different to go get another job
Oh,
offer?
I think the job market's hard right now. I really do think it's difficult right now. I think that employers are revisiting pay and trying to get people pay less for the roles so that their costs go down so that they can be profitable as a company. And I think that's hurting people, especially mid career and higher. And I think there's a lot of competition for the jobs right now because remember, we've just come off of a time where it was like a game of, what's that game we played as kids where, everybody would walk around the chairs and then there was one chair missing and somebody would get pushed out.
Yeah, musical chairs.
Musical chairs. Why can't I think of that? It's like a game of musical chairs. We just came from that,
Yeah.
and now there's all these layoffs, and so I think it's a really difficult time. I also think the job posting and the whole job board and how we get jobs is incredibly broken and due for a massive overhaul.
Yeah. Well, what should you do then? Is
Hmm.
there some advice on a best
Um,
way to handle it?
if I want a job, and I find a job posting that I'm very interested in, the first thing I'm going to do is research. I'm going to find out who works in that company. I'm going to go to LinkedIn probably and find out who are the people in that role or above that role or somehow surrounded to that role. I'm going to try and create a compelling message and friend them. So number one, you've got to start networking. You need to use AI, and people think maybe AI isn't for them yet, but it is for you. You really should get write your resume, the best resume you can, and then put the job description in and your resume and say, tweak my resume to make sure that it's a good fit for this job. And I've had a number of clients do that. And even though they need to still look it over and make adjustments and tweaks, typically the people that have done that get calls immediately because the way that the ATS works, the applicant tracking system that you are putting it into, it's reading your resume and creating matches for a recruiter. And a recruiter will only look at the desktop and it says, here's your top 5 matches for this job. And so if you're using the wrong word to describe yourself for that job, you may miss the opportunity just because you used the wrong word. And that's how AI, I think, can help people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and to your earlier point, if you network, you're almost bypassing the robot gatekeepers, right? Because you're now
Yeah.
in front of maybe potentially a decision maker.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I was a recruiter for quite a few years and I did the craziest stuff to try and get to decision makers. I mean, I would call into companies that were ironclad lockdown and just pick a common name like Steve in sales, if I needed to get into sales. And I go,
Yeah.
hey, I need to speak with Steve. I can't remember his last name, but he's one of your VPs in sales. And I would just get patched into some total stranger and try and reach the decision makers. So I know you can do it. You just have to be creative. But LinkedIn is a pretty good place to start to at least get those names and start making calls and see if you have any colleagues that are connected with those people so that you
Yeah.
can have someone make an introduction. Old-fashioned networking is still incredibly effective.
Absolutely. Do a quote and put Steve in there and then look for your look for your company.
Isn't that terrible? I would just call in and just I would go to the front desk and ask for Steve. And yeah,
Yeah,
I did
it's
all
not
kinds of
terrible.
things.
You're a salesperson, you're a hustler, right? Like
Yeah, I had to
mad
hustle.
respect, mad respect. Okay, so that's great. So we are coming towards the end of our conversation. Of course, I can pick your brain forever and ever, but we I only booked a little bit of your time, very precious as it is. Let's ask you some easy questions now. So rapid fire, favorite book that you're reading right now?
Well, I will tell you my favorite business book is Atomic Habits of all time. Like I reread that over and over again. I think it is just filled with nuggets of wisdom. So I absolutely love that. And I have a really hard time. I've got ADHD truly, and I have a very hard time reading anymore. So it has to be short spurts. So I probably am reading 10 books at any given time, but I'm reading like this page or this chapter and then this chapter over here. So there's one called Generations I'm reading right now, which is about the difference between boomers and X and millennials and Gen Z in the workplace. It's fascinating.
Yeah, we're so many generations now in the same workspace. It's crazy.
Yeah, just trying to understand each group and why they need and think the way they do is really interesting to me.
Yeah, generations. Okay. Okay, good one. And of course your book. You
Of course. Oh my gosh. My publisher would be so mad I haven't said much. Yeah. My book, The Unspoken Truths for Career Success, it's about how to navigate pay, promotions, and power at work. And it's doing really well. It's my first book. It was my dream to write a book. And then I got HarperCollins to publish it, which was my dream. And I've got both Audible version and the hard copy itself. And it's been a really fun project to do. And it's so
yeah,
practical. It's the book I wanted and needed in my career that nobody had written yet. I could not
yeah,
find any book written that has practical scripts, tips, say this, not that, do this, not that, about all of the things at work that just trip you up all of the
yeah.
time.
Yeah, it's the practicality is what I think people really crave, because
Mm-hmm.
we have a lot of theory and a lot of knowledge we get from our
Mm-hmm.
college days and classes we take, but that is the key. So thank you for
Yeah.
writing it, and we'll of course link it in the show notes.
Thank you.
And then favorite quote.
Favorite quote. I'm going to pull one from Atomic Habits because I'm always saying it, which is that every action we take is a vote for the person we want to be. And I love that. So whenever I get stuck during the day and I'm not getting things done, I'm thinking, what kind of votes am I casting today for the kind of person I want to be? and try and get back to center of the things that are important to me, whatever they may be.
Wow, that's good.
And that one's also a big one, for my son, Zach. As you know, my son, Zach, is trying to learn to walk again and use his hands and arms and come from a very dark time in his life. And so, and he's a recovering alcoholic. And we say it all the time. What kind of votes have you cast today for the person that you want to be? Because every action you take is just that little one more vote that gets stacked. You stack habits. And so we talk about that a lot at our house.
Yeah, that is wonderful, powerful. Yes, of course, like we are all striving to be that version of ourselves. And so if we, whatever, like you said, whatever we choose to do or not do is a vote for or against that.
Yeah.
Very strong, very strong. One thing our audience should do after listening to this podcast.
One thing they should do. Oh, I would say if there's something that is bothering you at work, a conversation that is overdue that you should have had, to sit down and draft a conversation, preferably with the tips in the book on how you craft that conversation, that conflict conversation, and go have it. Typically, it's going to be with a manager, but have the conversation, because it's been tested and data tells us that people that speak up at work are happier at work. And I don't mean people who speak up like they go all ham and, they're rude and they just lose their cool. And I'm talking about people who have thoughtful conversations at work about the things that are bothering them are in the high 90s if they speak up 13 or more times at work in a given year. It drops 30 points if you go to 6 times a year that you're bringing something up, and it just drops like a rock beyond that. So think about, what's the conversation I'm not having that I need to have? We often think we're having it and we're not. We're having a halfway conversation, and we are saying halfway the truth and hoping that the other person understands 100% of what we're trying to say, and it doesn't work.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's powerful research. We should definitely link that in the notes if you have access, or at least can point us to it.
Yeah, it's Elizabeth McCune did the research at Microsoft.
Okay. Okay, cool. Yeah, so 13 is then is a great number. So if you think you're speaking up and you're not, then just kind of remember, have you spoken 13 times this year? If you have not, then go for it. Yeah.
Yeah, that's once a month. I think that's doable.
Once a month. You can do it. Yeah, we can do it. Yeah. Well, what is the best way for people to connect with you, Tessa?
I would say Job Dr. Tessa on any social platform. You should be able to find me just about everywhere. And I have a podcast as well called The Job Doctor, and they can find it on Apple or Spotify. And what it is a deep dive. I have real people call with real problems, and we sort it out on air. And I think that it's really useful. You could see us negotiate pay or an offer letter or a hard conversation with a manager. And I would invite people to take a listen. Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for sharing your insights and advice. And of course, you have 1 million followers and counting, so people can find you in a lot of different ways. So thank you for coming to our podcast and sharing your wisdom with our audience. Thank you again so much. No, thank you so much for having me.